Good afternoon and welcome to the Way to Wow, People Making Money. I am your host, Kevin Bemmel, and as some of you probably know, unless you're joining us for the first time, we are here every Wednesday afternoon, 12:30 on the Pacific Coast. I think we're called the left coast, and 3:30 p.m. on the East Coast, the right coast, or I may have that backwards. I can never keep track. And then an hour in for each of the other two time zones. So last week, as a reminder, I talked about the three things that you should do in order to be as sure as you can about having a successful day. So it's all good and well to set goals, long-term goals, 10, 20-year goals, short-term goals, 3 to 5 year goals, short-term goals, 1 year. It's all great to have those goals, but if we're not working each day to reach them, we're not going to get there. So I invite you to go to our YouTube channel, The Way to Wow Show on YouTube. Check out last week's episode, as well as some of the other episodes. We've had some terrific guests, and I think you will find a great deal there to help you find your way to wow. That's who are you and what you want, right? And in this show, we talk particularly about finances and professional life, but there are many other topics there as well, all in line with the 3 pillars of attainment that you see here. See, I switched things around behind you again for those of you who are have seen more than one episode. It's like, wait a minute, wasn't that used to be over there? Yes, it did. So now I can have it right over my shoulder and go like this, right, and still be looking like I'm paying attention. So I have a guest today that I think you will really enjoy. I met Carl Savino. I believe it was at the retirement ceremony of one of my very close friends, a fellow by the name of John Rubino, a Navy colleague of mine. John and I are really like brothers, and Carl and I met, and I think we spoke a short time later, and we've been in touch and friends ever since then. At the time, Carl and I were kind of in a much more similar realm. We were both working with military people transitioning from military to civilian life. Carl has been doing that for a long time, over 25 years, I believe, and has been tremendously successful at doing this. And so for those of you who are watching or thinking, well, wait a minute, I'm not transferring out of the military, I invite you to stay and listen to what Carl has to say, because a lot of what he talks about will apply to you even if you are not a service member. If you're a recent college graduate, if you were a mid-career professional needing to make a transition, it's very possible that you're moving from kind of one domain, if you will, into something that's significantly different, not unlike going from the military to civilian life. And so if you do a little translating, I think you will find what Carl has to say will be very valuable for you as well. So Carl, welcome to The Way to Wow, People Making Money. Thank you for coming on the show.
No, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate the opportunity.
So, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, because I know you have so much great information that people can use when they're hunting for a job. But tell us, if you will, just to kind of give us the, Cliff Notes or the Reader's Digest version of, how you made the transition. As I recall, you were in the Army, and now, of course, you're in the corporate world. Talk to us a little bit about that transition so we can kind of get a flavor for what your background is.
No, thank you very much. So after a good number of years on active duty, I transitioned from the Army in 1992. My first position was with a firm called Booz Allen Hamilton. It's a very large technology government consulting firm here in the Washington, D.C. metro area. Mm-hmm. So after securing that position, I was at Fort Belvoir at the time. It was my last duty station. And I wanted to give back to my fellow officers who would soon be making that same transition at some point in their career. So I ended up giving a PowerPoint presentation on my lessons learned, on my personal transition story. And my boss at the time said, "Hey, Carl, you ought to write a book about it." Well, I was a little bit dubious at the time. I eventually reneged and agreed to do it. So I put together a manuscript that I showed to the president of Impact Publications, Ron Cronick. He and his wife, Carol, were the owners of Impact Publications, and they had written profusely. They had, I don't know, something like 70 to 80 different book titles out. And Ron was interested in possibly publishing our military book, but he said, "Hey, Carl, that's a good first effort, but what I suggest is that we blend it. We merged your book with another one of mine that's similar in tone, in nature." So Ron and I partnered came up with a book title From Army Green to Corporate Gray, which we published in 1994.
Okay.
In 1995, my sister was married to a naval officer, still is, so we decided to repurpose the book and title it as From Navy Blue to Corporate Gray. In 1996, my Air Force friends were begging me to finish the trilogy, so we did From Air Force Blue to Corporate Gray. Now, I like to think of, it's a team effort, but we have successfully built a business of service. So we have a passion for what we do. We saw a need at the time. There was an opening. Frankly, the military's transition assistance program was not as robust in 1992 as it is today. So we saw an opening. We saw an opportunity to provide services that we thought would complement what already existed in that space. So remember that, as I said, we did From Army Green, Navy Blue, and Air Force Blue over 3 years. And at the time, Kevin, we were selling copies of our book through the Post Exchange, the Army and Air Force exchange system that I know you're familiar with. You know, we may have sold a few thousand copies over the years, nothing to rock your boat. But in 1996, we changed our business model to one from selling the book to one giving it away. So again, here's the transition, moving from selling copies of our book to giving the book away. Now, how do we do that? Well, my last name is Savino, not Gates. So we had to devise an advertising mechanism to do that. So I give credit to my wife, Susan, who had a business background, that said, "Hey, Carl, we're going to give your book away to everyone leaving the service." And long story short, what we did was we placed recruitment ads in the book. So in the front section of our book, From Army Green, Navy Blue, Air Force Blue to Corporate Gray, those 3 book titles, we placed recruitment ads, and we then bundled those recruitment ads with job fairs and online services over the years. So again, we started with a print model, and for your audience that's not military per se, but the idea is, how do you think outside the box? So I would submit to you that at the time, the idea of placing recruitment ads in a book was not consistently done, or was pretty infrequently in terms of that. And then we have permission from each branch of the armed forces to give a free copy of our book away to everyone leaving the service. So in 1997, we went from giving away maybe 5,000 copies a year to selling 5,000 copies a year to giving away 250,000 copies a year. Also in 97, we started running our job fairs. So our first job fair was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And over the next 25 years, we've been hosting job fairs, which I'd like to talk about a little bit later here in your show. And also the third leg of our stool is Corporate Gray Online, our online website. But bottom line, when it comes to the book, what we were able to do is combine print recruitment with job fairs and with online services. And in that manner, deliver a win-win in terms of services, both to the companies that wanted to recruit veterans, as well as to the veterans themselves. Again, they got a free book. They got the opportunity to participate in our job fairs. They could use our website for the purpose of uploading their resume and searching, applying for positions in advance. So again, that's kind of the trilogy. That's an overview of the 3 primary services that we offer. Again, we built a business around ultimately doing a book, which gave us credibility, and figuring out a way to give the book away for free in a way that was a win-win.
So, and I just want to ask one more question about your background. What was you? What type of officer were you in the Army? I'm guessing you weren't a public affairs officer, right? Which
So
would be that's in marketing and all that, right? What did you do? Just so people can understand.
yeah, initially I was a personnel officer, but then I transitioned to the Signal Corps. So I was a Signal Corps, also did information technology type work as well. So it
Okay.
was a blend. It was a mix of different different types of work. I was assigned, of course, assignments in the United States, in Korea, and in Germany, all in a peacetime environment.
Okay. And so not anything really related, particularly related to starting a business, really, right? So, yeah,
No, not at all.
And I think it's important for people to understand that having a business background isn't required to successfully start a business. So it sounds to me like really, there were two factors. One, three factors: a desire to help, to serve; two, being creative; and three, having other people that you could talk to, work with, who could help you fill in the gaps of your own knowledge so that you could make your business successful. Is that?
Oh, absolutely, Kevin. It's a team effort. I have different players on my team, and they all bring special talents to our business. I personally could not run Corporate Gray alone. I want to come back to the military experience. I guess that gave me a domain of knowledge. So even though I didn't have a business background, having spent a good number of years on active duty, obviously I was very familiar with military service. So that was helpful in launching the business. But in terms of information technology support, we hired a programmer. In terms of someone to help us do the mechanics of creating a book, again, we hired an outside consultant. So I think it's important for people to know that they do not have to be an expert in every facet of that small business. As long as they're smart and creative, they can reach out to people and hire them, if you will, on an as-needed basis. So over the years, we have used consultants to handle different aspects of our business. I gave you two examples. One is in the development of our website, Corporate Grand Line. I hired an outside programmer who, on a part-time basis, has developed the site as well as rewritten and extended the site. So he has been with me now for over 20 years. And that's another factor is I think if you treat people right, you recognize their work, they'll stay with you for the long term. One of my colleagues, Karen Durkee, is our director of social media. She too has been working with Corporate Gray, I think going on 15 years. She and other members of my team are key to our success.
Wonderful. And one other thing on the startup part of your business. So a lot of people get hung up with, well, I need, $500,000 or I need, $5 million to start up the business. How did you handle that aspect of your company, if you don't mind my asking? I don't need numbers. I just conceptually, how did you handle it?
Yeah, no problem whatsoever. Frankly, the minimal investment was not significant. I would submit to you, when we started doing job fairs, we were profitable almost on day one. So for our business, yes, it's a risk. As with any small business, we had to rent the job fair facility. We had an outlay in terms of purchasing lunches for the recruiters, but it was not a significant outlay of money without specifics. Nothing that the average family couldn't handle. It was a pretty minimal amount. And because of that, we were able to do more and more events. We could expand the range of services that we were providing. Again, we couldn't do the job fair for free to the companies, but I do want to make the point that all of the services that we provide to the veteran are at no charge. So we have never charged the veteran to use our website. I don't believe in charging people to attend our job fairs. So those events are free. The book, as I said, we were able to do the book. We were able to print 250,000 copies a year because we were able to convince companies that it was to their advantage to recruit in this manner, that they would find the return on their investment. And I think by and large, that proved to be the case. So most of the companies that are working with us in terms of using our recruitment services are mid to large defense contractors and government agencies. So again, that's been a nice mix. So we were fortunate, I think, to find that good mix of companies and government agencies that really wanted to reach out to the military audience, before it was, quote, in vogue. Right now, I would say there are a plethora of different military recruitment firms that are out there doing similar services. So it's a much different now in 2022 than it was when I transitioned from the Army in 1992,
Right.
and to the benefit of the service member.
Absolutely. So, I've transitioned in some ways twice because I originally came out of the Navy in 2012. And then I went back on active duty a few years ago and basically had to transition again because what I was doing before that, I wasn't going to continue doing. So I have a sense of, what that is personally. And I think it can be overwhelming. It seems like there's so many things that we have to do. And I can imagine, if I think back, it's a long way back, coming out of college, and all of a sudden I don't know why it didn't dawn on me earlier. I have to now go find a job. No one was waiting to hire me when I finished my degree, especially since it was in architecture and we were in the middle of a, recession when I got out of college. So what would you say are the perhaps 2 or 3 issues or matters or tasks, however you want to describe them, that someone should focus on in order to avoid, first of all, getting overwhelmed so that they can feel like they can take action, but also put themselves on a track to gain ground, as we say?
Yes, good question. One of the things I always recommend doing right up front is an internal assessment of one's skills. What do you like to do? What don't you like to do? Let's make a list. Take out a blank sheet of paper and write down, these are the skills that I acquired through my military service, or these are the skills I acquired through my civilian service. This is what I like to do. This is what I don't like to do. In fact, I'm going through that a little bit with my son right now, who recently graduated college. So again, we're kind of relooking that same issue, figuring out what's best fit. Because ultimately what I preach in terms of gaining employment is finding those opportunities that align closely with what you want to do, where your passion is, where your interests are, and what you're good at, right? So along the lines, often I'm asked, well, Carl, how do I know what I'm going to be good at or what I will enjoy? And I think really that's where I say you've got to be doing as much networking, informational interviews as you possibly can. So one of the strongest recommendations I can make, Kevin, to people who are trying to figure it out what they want to do as that next opportunity, that next career, do as many informational interviews as you possibly can. I like to say there's a reason why LinkedIn was sold for, $24 billion. It works, right? So, if you don't have a LinkedIn account, create one and make sure that LinkedIn account represents you in the best possible light. Again, so use that tool to reach out to other people who have a background maybe that aligns in some way with yours, or doing things that you think you want to do, and try to learn vicariously through those other people. So again, networking with others to help you understand whether or not that career field makes sense, I think is a good thing. I also think another idea is to be a continual learner, a continuous learner. So, again, following college, continue to earn and extend your knowledge and skills and abilities in different aspects. So back to my son, his degree was in graphic design and data graphics. So I think it's important in his case that he also gains Adobe certification in that field as well. So be a continuous learner, get out there, network. I also think it's important to network if you had the good fortune of going to college, network with other college alumni. That can be very helpful. Even if high school alumni or associate's degree, or community colleges, wherever you went to school. Think about your networking contacts academically, also even in the military. So we have a large network of, quote, Army alumni or Navy alumni in your case, or Air Force alumni. So reach out to fellow service members, fellow veterans who are doing what you think you would like to do. And by and large, I think you're going to find that they'll be receptive and they'll take the time to help you understand what it is they do and to determine whether or not, give you enough information so that you can discern whether or not that career field in that company, that industry would be a good fit for you. Let me also say, I think that company referrals, employee referrals is a great way to gain employment. Here in the Washington, D.C. area, over a third of all hires are as a result of employee referrals. So again, one of the benefits of going on informational interviews is oftentimes the person with whom you're interacting may want to refer you into their company. And once you're referred into a company, all of a sudden you're on a different level in terms of degree of interest by the human resources department. Now you still have to sell yourself, and that's getting you in the door, but that's a nice first step. So again, my recommendation to your audience of job seekers is make sure you maximize your informational networking opportunities, excuse me, through the use of LinkedIn.
And I'll chime in here and say, I don't remember probably a couple of months ago, I actually did a show that explains basically step by step how to use LinkedIn to find those people that you want to talk to make the connections. I think I even posted a text, the language for a short message to send them that I used when I did this. And I will say that both in terms of my college, I went to USC, and military contacts, I think my response rate to those messages was over 80%, which when you think about it, that's actually quite extraordinary because in many ways it's a cold call, right?
Yes.
But because there was an affinity there, I think, alumni want to help their fellow alumni, and military people want to help their fellow military people. So yeah, I think that's absolutely essential. I did a show on how to do a skills assessment. And again, I have a tool that people can use where they can figure it all out. And I recommend even going beyond just jobs and thinking about nonprofit work that somebody did,
Yes.
Volunteer work, coaching, for example. If you were a coach for your, child's, Pop Warner football team for, 5 years. I mean, that is a substantial demonstration of the ability to coach people, train people, et cetera. Oh, it's Pop Warner football, but I mean, that's a, nationally recognized program. So I encourage people to look at their experience in a very, broad way.
No, absolutely. Cast a wide net. I often preach cast a wide net. Don't be tunnel vision to say, just because I did X, Y, or Z in the military or in my last civilian job, that should not preclude you from, taking off the blinders. Look at different opportunities that may come down the pike. If you didn't serve in the military, other ways to network are organizations at the community level, like Rotary Club, Key Club, Lions Club. Again, all great organizations, very civic minded, often populated by people who are movers and shakers in that respective town or city. So I would also encourage people, in addition to their college alumni connections, don't forget the community-based organizations like the Lions Club or Key Club or Rotary Club to further assist you in terms of your networking.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny what you mentioned about casting a wide net, both in terms of what you've done, but also in the organizations that you look to. I talk to, people coming out of the Marine Corps, and they'll say, well, I was Marine Corps infantry. I don't think anybody's going to pay me in the civilian world to go like this. They call themselves trigger pullers. I'm like, shipmate, while you may look at what you did as just pulling a trigger, let's take a step back and to use your language, what I think is a great concept, let's cast that wide net. I mean, the Marine Corps is absolutely brilliant at training in leadership, et cetera. So, I think part of it is sort of getting the blinders off. And I think too, coming out of college, kids, I should call them kids, I shouldn't, young people, they've done a lot typically in college beyond just, attending classes. So I think they need to look at that, in a broader, wide net casted way as well. So that's sort of task number one. What would you recommend then as a second task, if you will, that people really need to engage in and dig into?
Well, let me say, once you have a pretty solid idea of what it is you want to do in that next career, and you've developed your resume, you've done your homework, you've done your networking, and you've decided, I'm pretty interested in this particular field or fields, you might think about participating in job fairs. So we have been hosting job fairs for over 25 years, per your introduction. In the last 2.5 years or so, we've been doing virtual events, online, i.e. virtual or online, better known online job fairs. Mm-hmm. And so the advantage of the online job fair, of course, now is that you can be searching for jobs nationwide without, leaving your home office. Mm-hmm. So there is considerable interest among job seekers that we've seen in working remotely. And I think companies recognize that, if they're going to be competitive in terms of their acquisition of human capital, they have to be somewhat more flexible than they were pre-pandemic in how job seekers can interact. Now, having said that, some positions obviously are going to require the person to be there in person, right? So if you're working as a construction worker, I don't see very many opportunities, frankly, to work virtually. However, in terms of information technology and other fields, in social media, in public affairs, there are many different opportunities that have arisen whereby companies, government agencies, nonprofits are allowing people a more hybrid-based, more flexible type of working arrangement. Mm-hmm. So again, one of the offshoots of the pandemic is kind of a rethinking of the, what that model should look like, the employee-employer model. So again, there are now opportunities to work remotely. One way of identifying those is through job fairs. As I said, we've been running job fairs for 25 years. We've done well over 200 job fairs. If any of your viewers are interested in looking at our events, our website is corporategray.com, corporategray, Gray.com. When they're on our site, we have a link for job fairs. And again, we do one nationwide, what we call it a military-friendly job fair every month. That means our job fairs are especially for transitioning service members and veterans, but open to all job seekers. Okay. So again, I just want to make sure the moniker military friendly is conveyed appropriately. Again, I repeat to say it's especially for those who served in our armed forces, but open to all. And we are now starting to do state-based events as well. So starting in October, we're going to do a job fair for Maryland's veterans and Maryland's employers. Uh-huh. So again, we think that the job fairs are a great tool to help companies recruit people, not just veterans, but recruit individuals that go to work for them. One thing I want to say here with regard to job fairs, I want to give 3 recommendations, and that is number 1.
That's going to be my follow-on question, so this is perfect.
Yeah, make sure you research the companies. Research the companies, and we kind of tee that up for job seekers when they're on our site, Corporate Gray. To the left of the soldier, there's a link that says View Attending Employers. And that brings the user, the subscriber, to our job fair page. On that job fair page, there are 3 columns. There's a list of the companies, number 1. Number 2, the second column has number of jobs posted. And the third column is a LinkedIn button. So when you click on the company name, it opens up that company's profile so that you can learn about the company, you can visit the company's website, you can see what the company has said about themselves. Mm-hmm. When you click on the number of jobs posted, it's going to run a job search for you for that company. You can then add additional filters like keywords like state and winnow it down to those opportunities being offered by that state, by that company in your state that appear to be appropriate. And then thirdly, as I said more than once, we think it's important you network with other people who are working for that company, preferably veterans, if you're a vet, so that those networking contacts can give you insights into what that company is like, what the corporate culture is like, what types of opportunities they have, et cetera, et cetera. And really, though, go beyond the job openings, but really get a better sensing as to what the culture is like, what, typically what's the process like. Mm-hmm. So try to get information that goes beyond job listings, that gives you a fuller picture of the company and the types of work that they do. Because as I said, at the end of the day, it's all about fit. When you're in the military, you have an assignment officer or a detailer. Well, you're now that assignment officer. You're now that detail officer. It's up to you to sell your skills and experience. So as I say, at the end of the day, you're in charge of that sales effort. You want to make sure that you represent yourself in the best possible light. So also make sure you have a good, have some references that you can point to who can talk to what you have done in your civilian or military work world. Mm-hmm. So having references that can, again, attest to your skills, your experience, and why you should be seriously considered for their opportunity, that too can be very, very helpful.
And before we continue, I know you had a time limit. Do you have a few minutes more, or?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. So I did want to mention, again, this is going back maybe 2-3 weeks. I did a two-part, I did 2 shows back to back on how do you figure out company culture, organizational culture. What are the sources you can use? What are the questions you want to ask? And talking about why it's so important. So it's great to hear that, there's reinforcement there for that, because I think that's a really overlooked aspect. Some people get so, when they don't have a job, it's like, I need a job. It's like, do yourself a favor, figure out if this is a fit for you before you commit to working there, because otherwise all you're doing is just churning through another job. And I know that's very common among, I think the statistic, and you may know this better than me at this point, I think like 2/3 of service members leave their first post-military job after, I think it's 2 years or 3 years, something like that. It's huge turnover. And a lot of it, I think, comes down to not understanding the environment that they're getting themselves into, because they're so desperate just to make sure they have a job.
Yeah, after a year or so at Booz Allen Hamilton, I was very comfortable with helping others and telling them what that corporate culture was like. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing like having somebody on the inside that says, look, if you want to be successful in this company, these are the things you need to concentrate on. Mm-hmm. This is what's going to make for a successful career at the time at Booz Allen. I also think it's important to have a mentor. So having a mentor is important in the military. It's important in the civilian work world as well. And to me, the value of that mentor is someone who can give you advice and insights when you come to a fork in the road. You can go left or you can go right. You've got to make an important decision. Isn't it nice to talk to somebody who's been there and done that? It can give you insights into what the pros and cons are of the different alternatives. So the type of person that I recommend to your audience in terms of selecting a mentor is maybe one level above you in the organization. Look for that rising star. Look for someone who's well thought of, who represents the firm or the government agency well. You want to be like that person, right? They set the right example. So again, find that rising star, latch onto them. Look for people who have interest in you and who can spend some time. So it's not the president of the company. If it's a big firm, he or she is not the right person to be your mentor, frankly. But as I said, it's someone who's about one step above where you are in the organizational structure. And then once you're there, make sure you get back, right? Absolutely. So I think it's not a one-way street. I would also suggest that it's important that once you're in a position to make a difference, to help others along the way, that you get back accordingly.
Absolutely. So you mentioned to get ready to maximize, being at a job fair, the preparation that you do, learning about the companies, learning about the positions available, learning about the culture. Are there other things that, a person should do in order to be able to sort of make maximum use of job fairs, like the ones you do.
Absolutely, and not just ours. So this recommendation I'm going to give is applicable whether or not it's at our job fair or anybody else's job fair. I think it's important that the job seekers search and apply for positions in advance. And then, because most of the job fairs are text-based, they're text chat interactions between the recruiter and the job seeker, type up why you think you're a good fit for that particular position for which you would apply, so that you can quickly copy and paste into the block. Again, think it through. Company recruiters want to see people having applied for their positions in advance. That's just going to give you a huge leg up. So when you can apply for positions and be prepared to either text chat or verbally describe why you think you're a good fit for that organization, I just think that puts you in a better light. So I've heard this repeatedly from recruiters over the years, is that they really want people to be searching and applying for those positions in advance, so that when they get up to bat, so to speak, they're now at the job fair, virtual or in person. If it's an in-person event, hopefully the job seeker has internalized why they think they're a good fit and can be fluid in terms of quickly telling that recruiter, here's a position for which I've applied, here's why I think I'm a great fit. Here are some references that will help attest to my demonstrated success. So again, I think it's important to do your homework. And conversely, on the company recruiter side, we give the companies access to the resumes in advance, with the hope that they will search the resumes of the job seekers and identify people that they think are a good fit, and reach out to them in advance of the event and invite them to interview. So, honestly, Kevin, it's a two-way street. The recruiters have the responsibility to research, to search the resumes of the veterans who are looking for that next opportunity to align their needs with the skills and experience of that vet. But perhaps more importantly, the veteran needs to be able to, again, take advantage of the opportunity to find opportunities of interest, apply in advance, and type up why they think they're a good fit.
So what should someone expect coming into and then out of a job fair? I mean, are they going to get offered a job, during the fair, or is that really is that an unrealistic expectation?
I think it's somewhat unrealistic. I'm not saying that has never happened. But for most, I'd say a very high percent, those companies have to do due diligence. They have to vet the candidates. If the position requires a security clearance, that increases the level of vetting that needs to be done. They're going to check their references. So, it depends on the position, but I would submit to you that probably 95% or more of those interactions, I would characterize those as screening interviews.
Okay.
Right. To be fair, those are screening interviews. Ultimately, the company is trying to whittle down the number of people for a given position and then follow up. Maybe they come up with the top 5 candidates for a position that they're trying to fill. And then they'll do their due diligence. They'll do the harder screen, the deeper dive after the event is over. So I want to be fair to the job seekers to say, the expectation should not be hired on the spot. Not that it couldn't happen, but it's rare. And most companies and the job seekers should want those companies to do their due diligence as well.
Sure.
It's got to be a fit at both ends.
I would imagine as much research as one can do before the job fair, there's still due diligence that probably the job seeker needs to do once they've been through a couple of, initial screening meetings, et cetera, right?
Absolutely. And honestly, frankly, at some point, you really don't know the company until you're there.
Well,
but ultimately, you've got to give it your best shot, right, to try to discern what that corporate culture is like. One other suggestion I would give to job seekers is have a portfolio of your work, right? So have some online portfolio that you can talk to, that you can say, hey, here are examples of my work. So I think, I'm not from the show me state of Missouri. I'm in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But at the end of the day, having specific examples of your work online that you can demonstrate, that you can point to, I think that could go a long ways as well.
So here's a question that I hear, it seems like increasingly, and that is, if I've already applied to this company and we're in discussions and it seems like it's going well, do I really want to get into that kind of, deep discussions with another company and potentially cause a conflict? So what is your advice in terms of that aspect of job hunting?
Well, I think until you have a written offer, you're still in job search mode. So just because it looks encouraging doesn't mean, in my opinion, that you should stop going on other interviews. What you don't want to do, however, is play one company's written offer against another. That will not sell well. So my recommendation is continue to interview, continue to go and meet with other companies until you have a written offer and you've accepted that offer. But again, don't play games with the salary offers of one company versus the other. It will not go well once the companies catch on to that.
And what is your, let's say, somebody has 2 or maybe even 3 companies chasing them, and they end up coming to terms with one, and then shortly thereafter another company comes and says, hey, we want to hire you. What is your experience with how that second company responds if they're told, I'm sorry, but I took another position? Or conversely, what is your experience if the person decides, gosh, I'd much rather be at this second company, even though I've accepted over here? Do I tell these people I'm not coming there after all? Would you talk to us a little bit about those kind of conflicts?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, isn't it? And my general answer, my patent answer is, once you've accepted with a company, I think you owe them, probably at least 6 months. Okay. They've spent time meeting with you. And that's why I think it's really important that you really do your due diligence. But I think once you've given your word to a company and you've said, I accept your offer, to me, word's your bond. And I think you owe them a good effort. So whether or not that's 6 months or 9 months or a year, I think you should do that. And then the other company, if they're really interested in you, I think they'll understand. If things don't work out with the first company, then hey, I'll come back. Also, though, I'd like to point out, if you get turned down by a company, I would send them a thank you note. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview with you. You never know, you may have been number 2 on their list, and number 1 didn't work out. So I like to say, treat everyone like they're a general officer. You never, or admiral, whatever the case may be, a flag officer. You never know where that right opportunity may be. So treat everyone with respect, from the lowest level employee, secretary, to the most senior person. Any of those can tube your application. Because I know when I was at Booz Allen, they would go and ask the administrative assistant what she thought, or he thought. At the time, it was a she. So just be aware that all eyes are on you. So I think as you go through the job search process, as you meet and interview with different levels of people, they're all important.
Here's the funny thing. Probably the only time I ever faced that issue, because I've always been in business for myself, was when I was in the Navy and I had applied for a competitive position in the Navy, and I didn't get it. I still sent, a thank you. Well, actually, I was speaking to him. I said, hey, listen, I appreciate you talking to me. I appreciate the help you gave me in applying, and perhaps there'll be some kind of opportunity down the road. And he's like, you never know, kind of thing. And then I think it was maybe a month later, he called me up and he said, hey, the number 1 candidate, he can't go. You're number 2. Do you want to go? Right. Exactly. And so I think that there's a lot to be said for treating people the way we would want to be treated in this process, no matter how frustrating, because it can be, the job hunting can be very, very frustrating.
Yeah, it's very frustrating, and it's a very tender time on your ego. But just burn no bridges.
Yeah.
Right. Always be positive. Always be out there. You never know what's around the corner, so keep trying.
Now, what would you recommend for someone who has done due diligence on a company, and having done that has decided, gosh, I don't want to work for this company? And should they just kind of wait and see if they get an offer and decline it? Should they tell the company up front? How should that be handled?
Well, I don't know if you need to tell them that you're not interested. I guess I would wait. If they did then reach back out to me, I would say I'm looking at other opportunities at this time.
Okay.
So I think the response should be respectful. So I'm thinking about a friend of mine, he's a retired Army colonel, and his best opportunity was for more money than for the job that he accepted. But he didn't like the ethics of the company that had offered him $200,000 a year. So he went with the company that was offering him $150,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
So odd, we should all have those problems, I know. But at the end of the day, my point, going back to what you're saying here, is that, make sure that, I like to say, you like the people, you like the company, you like the mission,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not a 2-hour commute one way. So I'm here in the DC area. There are many factors that you should consider when evaluating different employment opportunities. What's the upward mobility opportunity? How much training opportunity are you going to have?
Mm-hmm.
How much vacation time am I going to have? How many layers of, from where I am to where I want to be? So,
Mm-hmm.
There are many different factors that go into this employment consideration. I like to say that money matters,
Mm-hmm.
but don't make money the overarching decision factor. Look at all the different factors that come into play. And again, it kind of boils down to, do you like the company? Do you like the people that you're going to be working with 8-9 hours a day? Do you like the mission? Do you see yourself fitting in?
Very good. Is there a third task or a third area of focus that you would recommend?
Not to jump out me directly. I would refer them to our book, The Military to Civilian Transition Guide. We have in our book different factors. We have a list of different factors that they could consider. Kevin, maybe you can put the link to our ebook in the information that you'll be providing.
Absolutely, I'll put it in the show notes for sure, so people can just click straight through and be able to. I assume it's a PDF, right? To download.
Yes, that's correct. And
Absolutely.
it's free. So again,
Great.
we're not trying to sell any of your audience here on reading our ebook, but we feel that, it's a good step-by-step process. We talk about the 9 steps in
Mm-hmm.
one's job search, from self-assessment to writing one's resume, to networking, to conducting interviews and following up, etc. So I would recommend that they get a copy of our book. I think they would find it hopefully of value.
And do you think that someone who doesn't have a military background would benefit from the book as well, at least in terms of the process?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Much of the material, a very high percent of the material, is going to be relevant to your civilian job seekers as well. So
Excellent.
yes, there are a few things that are, military niche in nature, military niche in nature, military specific, but by and large, as you just said, the processes are the same. So whether or not you're Joe civilian or Joe military or Jane or whatever, the process is the same.
Yeah. And are your job fairs open to non-military people? Are they open to military spouses? What is talk to us a little bit about that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, sure. The way we couch it is we call it military friendly. So
Okay.
by that we mean they're especially for those who served in our armed forces, plus military spouses. So having said that, if there are civilian job seekers who have interest and appear to have skills and experience that align with the company's needs, certainly they're welcome to participate in our events. Right.
Okay.
But I just want to make it clear that our focus is on helping the veteran connect. But we're calling it military friendly. All are welcome to participate.
Great. And I assume too, there might be some benefit for children of military families who maybe they're out of high school now, or they're out of college, and they know the military milieu, if you will, right?
They do. So there may be some entry-level positions that are appropriate. Although I would say, by and large, most of the companies that are participating in our events are looking for people with military experience, with domain knowledge. And I also want to make the point that not every position requires a security clearance. So too often, the job seekers are concerned that every job being offered by XYZ company, defense contractor, is going to require a security clearance. So that's not necessarily the case. And in fact, on the government agency side, some that are in the classified intel world, intelligence security world, they'll do their own vetting. So even if you don't have a security clearance, if they're interested in you, you bring some special skills, they'll take you through that security clearance adjudication process. Mm-hmm. So don't be overly concerned that if you don't have a clearance. Yes, having a clearance helps. It also depends on where you are. So here in the Washington, D.C. metro area, much of the work is being done in support of DoD, Department of Defense, and many of the positions do require a clearance. But once you get outside of this area, in the civilian work world, I think that you're going to find many more opportunities that don't require a clearance.
And when you say, kind of special skills, or would you give a couple of examples of what that might be?
Yeah, one example is language proficiency. Okay. So I was recently contacted by someone who's an Iranian American, and he's interested in working for one of the government agencies in intelligence space. So here's someone who doesn't have a DoD, Department of Defense security clearance, but here's someone who has some specialized skills. He knows Farsi, right? He knows the native languages that could be very helpful, very useful to a government agency that wants to keep track of what's going on in various locations, in particular the Middle East.
Okay, excellent. So, your associate Karen joined us. I do want to, Karen, if do you have a question or something you want to add to the conversation here? I don't want you to feel that you've been frozen out. So.
No, I've just been enjoying listening in. This was great information.
Excellent. And you can give us the inside scoop. How is it really working at Corporate Gray? Let's investigate their corporate culture here.
I'm living the dream.
Good job, Carl. You've got her drinking the Kool-Aid, as they say.
There you go. Yeah. Karen's a very valuable member of my team, as all are. So, and just in closing, I think it's, again, I say we've built a business of service and a successful small business because we have a strong team, right? We're very small in terms of number of people who work for Corporate Gray, but I think all my team members are professional. They're smart. They're leaning forward. They're loyal. I know that they're going to do the right thing when I'm not watching. So again, having a nucleus of people that you can build around to help complement whatever skills and experience you the business owner bring to the table is just so important, right? Make sure you train your people appropriately, make sure you treat them well, and the rest will go swimmingly.
Yeah, excellent. Well, Karen, thanks for chiming in here. I appreciate it. Carl, it was first of all wonderful seeing you, because we've been I think since the retirement, I don't think we've seen each other. We've talked on the phone, but it's nice to see you. I like your office. I like the tile.
Oh, thank you.
Looks like you ought to be here in California.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
Maybe I can come out and visit again. We used to do job fairs in San Diego, by the way.
Oh, did you? Oh, well, yeah, big Navy and Marine Corps town, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Carl, thank you so much. I do want to let everybody know, as we've kind of talked through the show here, in the show notes, I will have a link to Carl's website, Corporate Gray. But if you want to look it up, it is GRAY, not EY. So AY, if you want to take a look at that. But there will be the link to Carl's website in the show notes, and we'll also put in a link where you can download a free copy of Carl's book. I do want to emphasize a couple of things, and that is, if you are a job seeker, everything that Corporate Gray provides is at no cost. So when we talk about a subscription or something like that, there's no cost to any of these things. It's just and I'm one of the subscribers, so I know I get periodic emails about job fairs, about resources, etc. And they're absolutely excellent. So I encourage you, even if you're not looking for a job right now, but you think you might be in 6 months, 12 months, now is the perfect time to start building up your resources, building up your knowledge base. And so jump onto the Corporate Grade website, become a subscriber, start seeing what's going on, seeing what's out there. Listen, you may decide where you're at is actually a good place when you see what's out there, although the job market, remains very, very strong. So before I do my final wrap up, Carl, any sort of, we used to say, last shots here, anything you want to add here before we wrap up?
Kevin, no, but I appreciate the opportunity for bringing me on. Hopefully what I've said today will be a benefit to your audience, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
That sounds great. Well, I know it'll be of benefit to people watching it. What you have said is so cogent, so right on point. So thank you very, very much. So stay tuned. Again, we're here every Wednesday, 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, an hour in from each from each of the interior time zones. And a couple of reminders. One is, if you have a remarkable way of making a living, or someone who does, feel free to let me know. Maybe we'll have you as a guest, or have the person as a guest. I'm always looking for people who can not only inform, but also inspire. I mean, when you look at Carl's story, 30 years ago, he got out of the Army, and now he's the owner of a small business that's helping probably thousands of people every year. And he enjoys it. He works with great people. So Carl is really kind of an icon of what we're working to do for everyone here on the Way to Wow, People Making Money. It's not about making a ton of money necessarily. It's about finding that place of professional satisfaction. So if you know someone, if you have a question about anything or an idea, something you want to learn about, again, send us an email. Our email address will be in the show notes, or make a comment on any of the social media that we're on. Be happy to take a look at that and respond. So it just remains for me to, as I always do to end the show, to remind, I think it's mostly myself, frankly, of my dear friend Marie, who had such a tremendous influence on my life, a dear, dear friend who has been gone now for about 3 years, a little over 3 years. She made a big, big impact on my life. And so I think about her every day up there in heaven. And so, Marie, darling, I just want to remind you that no matter what happens, no matter where life goes, you are still my Belle. So thank you all very much for watching. Karen, thanks for joining us. Carl, thank you very, very much for being a guest. And hopefully we'll see each other soon.
Thanks again, Kevin. Take care.
You too.